maybe Boogie Cousins is the answer. And the funny thing is too is when you talk about the numbers of it, if he doesn't end up being what you want, it probably doesn't matter if you sign a better contract. Does it matter if you don't end up being the player that we want you to be? And it's the kind of thing where, like you said, if the Nets were going to approach him, then I'd say this could be the turning of the new leaf. And automatically, as soon as the Knicks signed him, I would say, watch out.
Idiots.
This is the beginning of the end for the and like it's the same player that I have a positive opinion about, but he puts on one jersey and I'm like, what a mistake. I can't believe these rubes over here.
The Knicks donkey show back at it, something like that. Like, here we go. All right. Before we get out of here, we have the draft coming up. We're recording this on a Wednesday. The draft is Thursday. Nets have they traded away their higher first round pick in the Taurean Prince trade. Should we talk draft or should we talk me getting stung by the bee today, which delayed our podcast? Which one do you think the people have more interest in? The reaction to my bee sting or a second round pick that the Nets might be able to get?
It's high value, and I want to go bee sting on this. And all I'm gonna say is that there is some room for optimism that you can get a guy who can contribute and can develop in your team in a later first round pick. So the Nets, if you're a Nets fan, don't look. You're not getting a world changer, but see who they take. See who they take, and then look at how they plug in. And that's what I think you want to be excited about because they have young players and they've done this over the past handful of years. So I'm going to wait to throw out the name that I've been hearing a little bit out online and how he might plug into the system. We'll get into that. Let's go bee sting here. Where were you when it occurred? And what did you say to the bee that really offended him? And that's because,
I was at a pool with a few other families that had the kids there. And I was kind of waiting around the pool, having a nice conversation. There's a beer or two involved. And I put my hand down on the side, and I must have just put it right on a bee. And I just, we're at this is kind of like a public pool too. It's like a kind of a club kind of thing. And I just scream the F word as loud as I possibly can with all these kids around and just start grabbing my hand. And in a very manly way, I think I texted this to you, in a very manly way, yelled, "The stinger is still in my hand." And so I yelled, this is like what a 4-year-old does. I'm 40, so I yell, "The stinger's still in my hand. I can't get it out. I'm holding it up as a preschooler would do and it wasn't even my wife that came in to save the day. She kind of just looked on. It was another wife who came in. So this is where the story really gets worse because if someone else's wife comes in and now she's helping me. And then one of the club attendees has to come over and bring a pair of tweezers and they have to screed it out. And I just sat there. I mean, I will say that this thing hurt like hell. It's still hurting me now. This many hours later. But probably what hurts worse is credit to my wife.
Ego?
The ego is destroyed. The ego is destroyed because my wife's pretty good about this. She's gonna wait till it stops hurting to really let the man flag kind of fly at half mast for a little while because it's going to be kind of brutal because my reaction. It wasn't like storming the beach at Normandy, kind of like the Greatest Generation kind of guy, getting out of the U-boat and just kind of going in there and fighting for the freedom of the free world. It wasn't that kind of thing. It was more like what you would see out of your toddler if they got stung by the bee for the first time. So I'm still reeling from it, and it was also why we started recording the podcast late. Who are the guys that you were kind of who are you sort of hearing about in the draft? Draft is not. I'm not even going to pretend I don't follow the draft at all. I said this last podcast. I'm not interested. I'll just wait to see who they draft. But who are you kind of hearing the Nets are targeting here in the late rounds?
And yeah, we talked about our lack of interest, I'll say, at the college level of basketball. We're not following that as heavily as some people might at this time of year, especially. But I've seen this a couple of different places online, where they're looking at Eric, and I'll say Paschal. I'll probably have said that wrong. He's a power forward. He's a younger guy, but basically everything that they're talking about with him is that he's a physical player. He has good athleticism, which I guess really means nothing at the NBA level because everyone's an athlete. But that he is someone who can come in and be ready to contribute early. And I think that that's a lot of what you want to look at when it comes to the draft for the Nets. They only have 2 picks, so you're not going to look at too long. But I assume that they're looking to identify guys that are going to come in and contribute and be pushing some of these players that they've had on the roster for the last few years to maybe take over a starting role. So Eric Paschal will be the name I would keep an eye on. He defends pretty well. He can defend some other positions. And he also has the 3-point shot from the outside. So he would probably, fit into the system successfully. Outside of that, there's a handful of other names near the bottom of that first round. Okapale has been one of the guys out of Stanford. I butchered that name for sure. a little bit of connection maybe to a Kevin Porter. But some of the guys, so the interesting thing, just to move off of player-specific stuff when it comes to the draft, some of the things that I've been seeing about mocks for the Nets is not necessarily where I thought they were going to go, which would be power forward, center, just bigger bodies for these couple of picks. If I'm seeing them talking about point guard, shooting guard, small forward, did that indicate anything to you in terms of the free agency and what maybe they're thinking about doing? And I know we're coming to the back end of this, but
my guess is, I'm not a draft expert, so I'm just going to take a little bit of a guess here. My guess is when you're drafting late first round and second round, you're just looking for best available guy on the board. You're not you're not drafting for need at that point. Really, at no point, honestly, with the draft, with the way the NBA works now, you really shouldn't be drafting for need at all, unless you are a move away from the championship. Otherwise, you should probably just draft best available player. And so that's I'm probably overstating it to some degree, because there might just be, you might just have such a glaring hole. But in general, you probably should just be looking for best player on the board and looking for a way for them to fit. And that could be my only really takeaway from that, without knowing who a lot of these guys are. That would be my only real kind of opinion on it without really knowing the exact plan.
And I think that's all that matters. Again, we're going to be coming back next week. The draft will have happened, and then once we know the player, we're going to dive in on the player, and then we'll kind of say, we'll let people know where we think he fits into the system and what kind of impact he can have for the Nets in this upcoming season. But by and large, as you've probably noticed from this podcast, is that free agency is where we're focusing when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets right now.
And by the way, we can come back next week, and a week in the NBA news cycle at this point is an absolute lifetime. The things that have happened between now and our last podcast, which was basically a week ago, the power has shifted, and the Lakers are the favorites to win the championship now, and the Utah Jazz are relevant, and the Kyrie, Horford's opted out, and or is going to opt out. I mean, so much happens on a daily basis. We're talking some of this stuff on Twitter. We're throwing this stuff out on Instagram as well. So make sure you follow us on all the social media handles. We'll put that in the show notes. Definitely make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. We're hosted on Spreaker, Google Play. We're everywhere. So wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure you go on there, subscribe to the podcast, rate and review it. That really helps if you like what you're hearing. And look, if you don't like what you're hearing, you're never going to listen to it again, just wrote a 5-star thing and just do it on the way out, okay? As like a nice kind of little goodbye present if you're not going to listen
just
anymore.
Just throw it up,
just or as they used to say on the ESPN thing.
We don't gesture.
Don't even listen, just download. That's all I care about. All right, we will be back next week talking the draft, the way the draft shook out, more free agency news. I'm sure that everyone in the NBA will be on a different team by the next time we talk the way this thing is rolling. Buddy, talk to you next week when we talk more Nets.
More poetry.